and to TeachStarter. I'm Greg. I'm the head of product here and also co-organizer of the Gold Coast ProductTank, but helping out because I also work at TeachStarter for the Brisbane one. If you are not aware, ProductTank is the world's largest community by product people for product people. There is the Mind the Product arm, which is the conferences, and the ProductTank, which is the local meetups. And the mission is to make product people more successful by coming together to further our craft. We've got some new organizers as well. I'm going to get the ones that are here to raise their hand. So we've got Carlos and Sakandra, thank you. Ben isn't here, I don't think.
Yeah, but Carlos is.
And yeah, Carlos is there. Brilliant. Also, we've got some other upcoming events. On the Gold Coast, we've got Andy from Spriggy, who's going to be doing a talk on growth product. And the next one in Brisbane is going to be hosted by Tanda with Will. Where's Will? And he's going to be talking about moving fast when your industries don't. Before we continue, I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagera people, the traditional owners of the land. So we pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Okay, before I hand over to Liz, now that I've done the spiel, toilets are also through there, just to the right. Is there anyone here that's from the Gold Coast? Out of interest? No, just me. Good. Cool. Is anyone here hiring product managers at the moment? Put your hands up. Okay. After the talk, go talk to Luke. Brilliant. All right. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Liz, the CEO of TeachStarter, who has been the CEO of Dictionary.com in Silicon Valley, and she's going to talk about the differences that she's noticed between both Brisbane and Silicon Valley and how we approach startups and product in general.
Thank you, Greg. And thank you all for coming. This is I'm excited to be here, Lou. I don't think she can hear me. There's one seat here, there's one seat here. It's a tight squeeze. Someone can steal that one or this one. I'll stand. Please make yourself at home. If you're hungry, get up and grab some pizza. There's plenty there, I think. Is there still more pizza? Yeah, great. So I've and I'll hopefully have time at the end for Q&A, but I've called this my accidental career in tech because I didn't start out planning to be in tech. It just kind of happened. And I'll get into a lot about the differences that I've observed in Brisbane and the Silicon Valley and kind of how I'm adapting to it. But I like to tell stories. So I'll tell you a little bit about my kind of story and how I ended up in tech and what I've experienced along the way. And I think that story is important because, disclaimer, the opinions that I'll talk about tonight are solely my own. They're based on my own life experiences, and the reality is people with different experiences will probably think and feel differently, and that's okay. Please note, I tend to sometimes talk in black and white. I know there's a lot of gray. So take it all with a grain of salt. I'm just sharing. Down the bottom, it says disagreement welcome, discord course valued. I'm happy to take all of this offline. So I'll start out with just a little bit about me. I've always been a little bit of a rebel. I've always been a rule breaker and not a rule follower. And that comes through in my life story. Does anyone recognize this town, this street? Anyone know where this photo is taken from? If you know me, you can answer. Probably not. Not New Zealand. It's close. Toowoomba. Yeah, this is Toowoomba. So my story doesn't begin in the Silicon Valley. I actually grew up in Toowoomba. I'm the daughter of a truck driver and a teacher's aide. And yeah, so I had very humble beginnings, I guess you could say. all of the friends I went to school with became school teachers. My brother is a school teacher. He teaches at the high school we all went to high school at. My mother still works at the primary school we went to. My brother's hobby is mowing lawns and fixing lawnmowers. And I didn't quite feel like I fit in that version of the world. So when I was 19, I hopped on a plane and did that. This was my first long haul flight, my first time out of the country. Did I mention I was 19? I had 2 suitcases and I didn't know what I was doing. Like in retrospect, I look back on like 19-year-old me and I'm like, why didn't someone pull me aside and say, Liz, what are you doing? In fact, I was going to San Francisco and all I knew of California was what I had read in the World Book Encyclopedia, because that's how you did research back then, 1999 people. And I kind of expected I'd find palm trees. I was sorely disappointed. This is what I found instead. And this is actually of great significance. And this is like a memory that's kind of burned in my brain. Leaving the San Francisco airport and driving up the 101. Some people have done that drive before. Lots of billboards. The skyline's changed dramatically. Now it's dominated by Salesforce Tower. But I saw this Yahoo sign, and this was the original Yahoo sign, and Yahoo owned this billboard for like 25 continuous years. I'm not sure if it's still there today. But I remember seeing this sign and going, oh my God, I've used Yahoo. And it like felt really special, and like I'd arrived, and this was like, but Yahoo I had actually used 2 years earlier in the high school library, because that was my experience of the internet up until originally, and like I'd done some GeoCities online in the university library, and like this was like early internet era. I had no idea what I had the world that I had entered and how special and how meaningful it was, and I wouldn't figure it out for a few years. So this is kind of my unconventional path in like summary. And I write it this way because my career and my life have been very much interwoven. So when I was 19, I was an immigrant and a poet. That's what I wanted to do with my life, was write poetry. When I was 20, I was making money as a barista and studying philosophy. I kind of had an epiphany that wasn't going to pay the bills. So I changed to economics, which was like, you know, philosophy for people that want to make money. By the time I was 24, I was married and an analyst. By the time I was 26, I left off at 26. I was working full time as an analyst. I was an MBA candidate, and I was pregnant, very pregnant. I'll fast forward the messy part about my marriage. By the time I was 35, I was becoming a CEO and getting divorced at the same time. Remember that part where I'm like, I don't follow the rules, I don't do things in order. And when I was 40, I came home. And so all of a sudden, even though Australia was always home, I very much felt like an immigrant all over again. And for a little bit unemployed. And now I'm a CEO again, and the solo mother to 3 boys. So I use the word solo intentionally because their father still lives in the States. And so they're with me. I'm truly like 100% of the time, basically. So, you know, that's a very important part of my life. I'll just share very briefly about that. We have wanderlust. Like my 14-year-old is planning the next 3 years of travel as we speak. Montaigne, my baby, he's 9. He's a competitive gymnast. Malachi, 11, is the onerous musician. I left onerous off, but he's just the onerous one. And Marquise is a gamer. He built his own PC this year, which was really cool. Nick helped. Perhaps a topic for another ProductTank will be how I run my home like a business. It works. Okay, so that's just a little bit about me. Sorry for the boring bits. What is the Silicon Valley other than the fact there are no palm trees there? You know, it's really interesting because I had to really kind of step back and think about this question, like, what is the Silicon Valley? Where is the Silicon Valley? Who is the Silicon Valley? It got a little esoteric for a moment, but I think I think the next 4 slides like all partly answer the question, and I'm not sure if I've fully answered the question here about what is the Silicon Valley. This kind of mythical thing almost. It's definitely a legacy, right? Like if you actually do a little bit of reading about the history of the Silicon Valley, there's centuries-long history of technology, science, and research, really starting in the 1800s, where San Francisco, because of its geographic location, became a hub for the telegraph and radio tech. In the 1930s, the NASA, it was actually bought a big hunk of land, which is now called Moffett Fields, because it was cheap. It was originally agricultural land, and they bought it up cheap, and that became a hub for aeronautical and space research. So a lot of scientists and researchers then flooded to that area. In the 40s, you have the founding of HP and Bell Labs. Stanford Research Internet becomes part of ARPANET. Stanford Research Institute merges with ARPANET in the 60s. That's the foundation of the internet that we know today. In the 70s, Zero opens Park Labs, which was where things like the graphical user interface and Ethernet computing came from. I need water. You guys can read the rest there, like just this huge legacy. And I honestly, I don't know this for sure. Like this is what I've read and this is what I'll posit. But I think without that early history as a center of science and technology and research, it's hard to imagine the Valley being what it is today. And I think Stanford plays a very large and pivotal role in this. Is it a place? So this is really interesting. I'm not sure if you guys can make it out on the slide here, but back in the day, the Silicon Valley was really kind of considered San Jose, Santa Clara. That's where you see your older tech firms like Intel, NVIDIA, Cisco being founded. You know, the name Silicon Valley comes from the silicon and chips. So this is all your chip manufacturers, you know, and then Apple moves to Cupertino, and kind of as time has gone on, the Silicon Valley has really crept its way up the peninsula here. And now you've got not just Airbnb and Dropbox in San Francisco, but Salesforce, and then Google and Facebook, and everyone is opening offices in San Francisco because that's where their teams want to be. That's where people are living. And then rent gets so expensive in San Francisco that everyone goes over to, all the startups go to Oakland because Oakland's cool. And now Pandora's in Oakland and Uber's in Oakland. And then COVID happens and everyone like goes out to the suburbs. You know, it's hard for me to say Silicon Valley is a particular place because it has definitely moved around through the years. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I particularly spent most of my time in Oakland. So it is a place, but kind of, it's, you know, it's a fuzzily defined place. Is it a community? Sure, it's a very wealthy one. And you kind of have to experience this to get it, like it's palpable. In the Valley, 286 of every 1,000 public sector workers work in big tech. That's kind of crazy, right? 38% of the population is foreign immigrants from all over the world. 52% of the population has graduated from college. That compares to about 35% of the US in general. The Stanford and UC, that should say UC, not US, Berkeley alumni networks are massive. I was reading about this in preparing for this. The Stanford alumni have founded, okay, this was as of 2011. This was the most recent data I could find. 40,000 companies founded by Stanford alum that generate over $3 trillion of annual revenue and employ 5.4 million employees. That's a bigger economy than the country of Finland, just from graduating classes of Stanford. So when I say Stanford has a massive impact here, Stanford has a massive impact here. It has absolutely the most millionaires and billionaires per capita. I can't tell you how many BMW i4s I saw, and like, didn't they just come out? I just got home, by the way, last night, so it's all very fresh. and like tons more money pouring into this area every single day. So more than 1/3 of US-based VC funding went to the Silicon Valley in 2022. That's $25 billion going just into Silicon Valley startups out of $69 billion for the whole of the US. So more than New York, LA, and what was the third place? I think it was, I don't know, there was a third city, more than the next top 3 cities combined. So I guess in a sense, it's a community, it is a wealthy community, and it is very much a community that is who you know. And that's why these alumni networks are so powerful. I think perhaps most importantly, the Silicon Valley is a mindset. That's in Reid Hoffman's words. I hate the fact that I'm quoting Elon Musk here because I'm not a fan. But Elon, I think he said it well. I'm a Silicon Valley guy. I just think people from Silicon Valley can do anything. And we'll talk about this, but I think that attitude is incredibly powerful, but also incredibly dangerous. I like Anne Wojcicki. Hopefully I said her last name correctly. She's the founder of 23andMe. I like her quote here. Part of the beauty of the Valley is that people generally encourage you to think crazy. It's the hypothesis that there is nothing sacred that cannot be changed. And in the words of Richard Hendricks, does everyone know who Richard Hendricks is? Look, guys, for thousands of years, guys like us have gotten the shit kicked out of us, but now for the first time we're living in an era where we can change and build empires. We could be the Vikings of it. And you know, anyone can do anything in the Valley mindset. So just a little bit about my experience in the Valley, because you know that was a little bit more research based. And I have to tell you, like, full disclosure, my career wasn't in VC-backed startups in the real Valley. My career was in corporate tech on the outskirts of the Valley. But you know, I still got to see and observe and learn a lot. So remember I mentioned Oakland earlier, it's up here. I've always described Oakland as the place where the Silicon Valley meets the human experience. And there is a sense that when you go deep into the Valley, you know, you go onto the Google campus, to me, it can feel pretentious. It can feel silicony, plasticky. It can feel very much removed from reality in some ways. Oakland is like basically the opposite of that. Has anyone been to Oakland before? Yeah, awesome. So it's kind of like the town versus the city mindset. San Francisco is the big city, and literally 10 minutes over the bridge is Oakland, the town, which is a port town. So it's the port that supports the region, the whole region, but very much, historically lower socioeconomic. It is the birthplace of the Black Panther Party. Does anyone know? Does everybody know what that is? A few people. Great, strong ties to UC Berkeley, and particularly like the anti-Vietnam Wars and all the hippies that live there. So I'm trying to paint a picture here. There are more artists per capita than any other US city. So rather than more billionaires and millionaires, you've got more artists. It was home to Tupac, MC Hammer, E40, Digital Underground. Some of you know who those folks are. If not, like Spotify later. This is real human experience. It is a top 5 diverse US city. So there's 125 languages or dialects spoken in Oakland. Imagine running the school system, imagine running the ESL programs for that. But also, I think it's the largest density of lesbians in the US. So it's a truly, truly diverse place. You have to see it, experience it to believe it. Steel dinosaurs. So the port, like basically from almost anywhere in Oakland, you can have a view of the cranes, which literally at the port of Oakland that look like dinosaurs. And if you turn 180 degrees, you can have a view of the redwood forest. It's a truly beautiful city. Where all the legal marijuana is. Sorry, guys, I didn't go to the dispensary while I was there. And while I was there were 3 major sporting teams in Oakland. And, you know, I think sports is a real human experience. Like, if you want to test your tenacity, play professional sports, right? So yeah, I spent most of my time in the Bay in Oakland, and a lot of my career, because the company I worked for was too cheap to pay San Francisco rent. So they paid Oakland rent and locked in a long-term lease before Oakland became desirable. And I cut my teeth at what I call a birthplace of internet giants that wasn't a VC. There's not many of these, but IAC, does anyone know who Barry Diller is? No. So Barry Diller, gosh, where do I start? So he actually is an ex-media mogul. He came out of ABC. He founded Fox Network before it became ultra-conservative, big media. And in the 90s, he was on the set of QVC Home Shopping Network. Remember those, you guys are just familiar, like the TV set, and they're talking about products and people are phoning in to order. And he kind of recognized that this was shopping retail being disrupted, and got really curious about what other categories would be disrupted by interactive technology. And, you know, as you do, Barry basically decided to kind of pick a category at a time. And rather than investing in startups, he picked established companies that had the potential to be a category leader. And then he was very, very patient with his investments. So Match is like an excellent example of this. I think Barry acquired Match in the late 90s, no, early 2000s, I should say. And then it was IPO'd in 2018, right? So he held that asset for 20 years until the point in time where he's consolidated all of the other dating companies that matter underneath it, and now he can IPO it as a standalone company. And that's a playbook that he's replayed through a lot of these companies. Bill's iPad. Oakland is Moneyball. Yeah, Moneyball is, yes, definitely features Oakland, the Oakland A's. And so this is where I cut my teeth. I actually started my career at Ask.com, and Ask.com was a company that Barry had identified as a potential category leader in search. He was just a bit late to the game, and you know, it was a great company 20 years ago. It didn't have the technology chops that Google had to truly compete with that space. But I started there as an analyst. I worked for a number of IAC operating companies over the years. Didn't meet Barry until much later, but I think, you know, in a large corporate, the way of thinking, the mindset permeates down. And so I think Barry probably rubbed off on me in some way, shape or form early in my career. Later, I had the opportunity to move into corporate development. So rather than sitting in one of IAC's operating companies, I actually moved into a corporate role where my goal was to identify acquisition targets that we could roll up into a digital publishing category leader. This was like not long after BuzzFeed had become really big, and we're like, how can we basically create a category leader in the digital publishing space? In the course of doing that, I researched lots of acquisition targets, you know, in categories such as travel, babies, family, like anything that you could write about. It, as long as it was digital publishing, we were there. Wide range of business models, locations, and management styles. We ultimately did 5 acquisitions and integrated 5 companies, and I think that's where I adopted a mindset of being optimistically cynical. and hopefully, I don't know, does that describe me to you a little bit? Yeah.
I think that describes most of the product, to be honest.
Yeah, I like it. I think the thing I learned more than anything in this period of time was it boils down to something my boss at the time always said was it's about fundamentals, the talent, and the IP. But we always ended up spending 90% of our time talking about the talent. So mostly the talent. And then, you know, so now as a leader, I spend most of my time talking about our team. So far, so good. That's my story. I'll get into now kind of what I see as the big differences between my experience of working on the outskirts of the valley. But, you know, I think in that corporate development work, seeing a lot of companies that were coming out of that startup environment and looking for their exit, my experience here. And in a nutshell, everything is different. Everything's different. And some of that's great, and some of that presents challenges. Okay. All right, the reason I have these random billboards on this slide, there is a reason, is I think it's the easiest way I have to describe how fundamentally different the area is compared to Brisbane. And in a nutshell, you know you're part of something bigger when you're in the valley and working in tech. It's everywhere you go. It's, you know, any road, any freeway, this is your billboard. I think we were boarding the plane and my son looked over and he saw a billboard for Notion. He goes, "Don't you use that at your work?" Yes, it's everywhere. Tech is everywhere. I think another example that my 14-year-old observed was that all of his friends in the Bay Area have iPhone 14s. Not 14s. Is it 13? Are we on 13 or 14?
13.
iPhone 13s. And he has friends in Australia that have iPhone 5s. And it's like, tech is everywhere. It's if you don't have a 13, there's something wrong with you in the Bay Area. Another way I experience this is going to brunch on a Sunday morning and sitting at the bar and having brunch, and the conversations that you hear around you. It's tech is everywhere. And I think that, you know, in contrast here, I find myself really having to explain what I do and what the tech industry is. And I'm fine doing that. Like, I'm more than happy to tell people and take the time to explain our industry and why it's exciting. But I do kind of miss that feeling of being part of something better, bigger, and of them. And so then that's why I love coming to these events, is because I get to have a snapshot of that, being part of something bigger and something that has momentum and movement, and being aware of what everyone else is working on, because it's just in your neighborhood. Okay, we got to talk about digital. I was really confused when I moved here what digital business was. Like, I've now adopted this language because I've been here for a few years. But when I was, you know, starting my job search and figuring out what I wanted to do, I was like, what is a digital business? Why do they keep saying digital? Why digital? I think, you know, business is just business. And I'm not sure that we're really doing ourselves a favor by describing our businesses as digital businesses, like, as if there's something other than a business. Like, I get it. Like, you know, you're in a mining business, or you're in a business that works in the mining industry versus a mining business. I think there's a subtle but important difference there. I think the other distinction that I see in the fact that we describe our businesses as digital is that in Australia, are there businesses that aren't digital? Like, I think in the Bay Area, in the States, probably more broadly, every business is digital. And you know, mining is digital, tourism is digital, all of these industries have technology. So yeah, I was really confused about digital for a while. I'm like, well, why not tech? Like, why is it digital and not tech? Like, what does this digital thing mean? Can we just be in business? And I think that I just wonder if the need to kind of qualify a business as digital is setting it aside as like different or not serious or not, I don't know what, but that has really just stood out as a stark and very obvious difference. And, you know, I think it probably relates to in the Valley, like in the US, tech is such a major piece of the economic pie versus it being a small sliver here. And my hope, like part of my hope in coming home was that I get a bit meta here for a moment, sorry. Not Zuckerberg meta, but like meta and big and abstract. But I think that you look at businesses like mining and digital, and apologies to anyone who works in those industries or knows people that work in those industries, but they are fickle industries in many ways, right? They're very reactive to economic climate. They're very, as we will have known from from COVID, they're very limited in, like, very resource constrained. And so I think that for Australia, we've really benefited from having rich natural resources for these industries. But what I really get excited about the tech industry is that there's almost an infinite resource, and it's just people's knowledge. And we have all the makings of a very robust and very vibrant tech industry in Australia and in Brisbane, because we have a great education system, and kind of that's where it all starts. So I don't know, do we work in digital business or do we just work in business? I'll let you guys decide. All right. When was the last time anyone asked you, what's your growth rate? What's your valuation? How much you've raised? And anyone had any of those questions like in the last 3 months? Couple, right? Anyone been asked recently, are you profitable yet? Yeah, that's the one I always get. I tried to explain to my neighbor over and over again, like that's not the most important thing, but it just doesn't quite get it. And I think that really I had a stark experience of in the Valley. It's, you know, what's your growth rate? How much have you raised? What's your valuation compared to are you profitable? And I think, you know, I think probably in our small circle, we understand and are more focused on the more value-based questions. I think outside of our little ecosystem, people are much more focused on profitability, and not even revenue, just profitability. And I think there's probably a number of reasons around that. I think in general, as a culture, we're a lot more risk averse, right? So we want to know that we're getting the surest and most trustworthy return on investment is profitability. Valuation seems a bit abstract and esoteric, and like, is it really defensible? Is it real? But I think this is really important. This actually, other than like me having to explain to my neighbor over and over again, like why profit doesn't quite matter. I think this actually has a really profound impact on the way we think about and manage our products and our businesses. And I've tried to capture it at the statement at the bottom here. Customer value is more closely aligned with enterprise value than profit, and even than revenue, right? Because I can double our revenue tomorrow. All I've got to do is double my price. But if I actually created more value for my customer, I've actually created more value for my shareholders. Like enterprise value is very imperfect, right? But it gets a little bit closer to something that is more real, more sustaining, more enduring than are you profitable today? I think profitable is a today question, right? It is a question that is inherently in this moment. Are you profitable right now? Versus what's your value is really more a reflection of what do we expect in the future about your business? What have you created that has an impact on the world that results in future earnings and future value and future potential? And so if you manage your business for profit, and this has been a very real experience that I've had here at TeachStarter, because we're 100% bootstrapped. So we have to be profitable by definition. So yes, we are profitable because we don't have outside investment, but that really then constrains the way we make decisions in many ways. And we're working through how to shift and make that move to where we are more focused on value than profit. But I think that if you're focused on profit, you can sometimes kind of shortcut your growth, because you've got to get to a real return, but it isn't necessarily where the real value is. Does that make sense to everyone conceptually? Cool, I'm gonna move on. All right, this one might be the one that's controversial, but I see a few smiles. Engineers as founders versus prior users as founders. So this is definitely, there's a lot of gray in this area, and I will tell you, I know instances of both of these scenarios in both Brisbane and in the Valley. I would say my perception is that it's more often than not that in the Valley, a founder is going to be an engineer or a product manager or, you know, UI, a product designer or something of that ilk. More often than not, my experience is that in Brisbane, They are people that have been users of, or maybe not users, but have encountered the problem on a personal level that their business now attempts to solve. And again, this is very much, you know, case in point for TeachStarter. So Jill and Scott, who founded TeachStarter, Jill was a teacher, and she went on with her husband to start TeachStarter. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. Like, prior users as founders, they bring to their new company like an inherent passion, an interest, a commitment, a deep empathy for their customer. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. The stark difference I see in between this and this is these guys are solving problems people don't know are problems yet. There's a mindset, there's a way of thinking, there's a rigor, there's a methodology that they have that someone who's encountered the problem and trying to make it better doesn't have that skill set fundamentally. They can learn it, like these guys learn this skill set all the time, but if you start with that skill set, you get a different outcome. And I'll give the example I'll give of this is, excuse me, Uber. So we started using Uber it was around 2013 in San Francisco, and when we were traveling to New York. And I know that because my youngest son had just been born. And I'm like, this is really cool. It's a new way of doing taxis. And like, that's all we could see, right? All we could see was it was an easier way to get a taxi. Was a little less creepy than getting in a taxi, because there was this idea that somehow these taxi drivers had been embedded. And one day, not long after like first encountering Uber, I was talking to someone who happened to work at Uber, and I'm like, this is really cool. It's a new way to book a taxi. He goes, no, you're missing the point. We're a logistics company. What? You're a taxi company? No, they knew from the outset. It was, you know, engineered the whole way along to be the logistics company that it is. And so now you have Uber for food, for rides, for trucking, for car rentals. It's like this was their vision all along. That makes sense. So, you know, I encourage all of you engineers and all you product folks, like, be bold, be founders. That's where real disruption happens. If you're a prior user of a product that's like, or have encountered a problem, like, go learn the engineering stuff. It will really help you, you know, build to your success. Okay, talent. Oh my God, I could speak for a whole hour on the subject of talent and the differences between talent in the Bay and talent here. I think in a nutshell, there's a massive talent pool. Like, there's millions of, hundreds of thousands of engineers, 286 for every 1,000 people working in tech in the Bay Area. There's also massive competition. So when we were hiring at Dictionary, we were literally interviewing the same people that we're interviewing at Google or Facebook or Uber, and they were getting offered, you know, $40,000 more than what we could afford to pay, plus you know, stock options in those companies, which were greatly valuable. Or they were interviewing at unheard of startups that were offering 2% of the company, and I call those lottery tickets. So that was really tough. And, you know, but on the flip side, there was lots of them, you know, and we just had to, and we had to have a hiring strategy that was like, well, what the people that want to work for Dictionary, what are they looking for, and how do we cultivate that? And if they're money motivated, that's not good. If they're risk takers, that's not our people. And we found the people that were our people. But we did have to kind of really cut through the noise. If anyone here is from, we had the first billboard for if you want to work here. I know there's SwiftX, thank you. SwiftX did that here recently. I was doing that a while ago. It worked. What else about talent? I think the other big standout in talent in the Bay Area versus talent here is really just the breadth and depth of experience that talent would come to the table with. And we'll get there, right? We just need more time. Brisbane just needs more time, and you know, Sydney and Melbourne are getting there. They've had a bit more time with their tech industries. But you know, what we would consider a senior product manager was someone with 10 to 15 years of experience, and that they've had experience in 3 to 5 different companies. Here, I'll consider someone senior if they've got 5 years of experience. That's great. That's almost unheard of in the Brisbane market, right? So that breadth and depth of talent then, you know, means that you have people coming into your team that have done it a few times versus maybe they're doing it for the second or third time, or the first time. And that's okay. I just think it's a standout difference. And then, you know, there's a real critical mass around talent. There's a real, I think, momentum effect that happens where early companies in this industry are seeding the talent, are seeding the next founders, or seeding the next managers, the next leaders of the businesses here. And it just takes time for that to kind of turn over to where, you know, there's a real ecosystem effect. And I think we'll get there. I'm really excited by the talent we've hired at TeachStarter recently. I'm excited by everyone I'm meeting at these events, and I know there's really great potential in the talent pool we have here, but we have to be willing to invest into it as an industry, as a collective industry. I think the scary thing I see is when like the big tech companies come in and basically vacuum up talent, and they're not really doing anyone any favors. Like, they're vacuuming up the talent that exists now, but they're really disrupting an ecosystem that they will benefit from in the future. Name any names. See any actors, you want to know who I'm thinking about. But I think that if I could speak to recruiters at those companies or managers at those companies, I'd really implore them to think about the ecosystem that they're part of and how they can benefit from nurturing and cultivating talent in an ecosystem versus owning it all for themselves.
Aren't they killing competition as a result of it? Because they already have monopoly power.
Sorry, say that again?
Aren't they killing competition as a result by starving us of valuable materials? Because they already have monopoly power, such as Google and Amazon. So, like, scooping up every single piece of talent that potentially could create a disruptor. Also, it is a strategic play as well.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll talk about kind of humanity at a point in this presentation, which I think is important too. Yeah, and I think that, you know, the advent now that we've all gotten used to remote working, you know, vacuuming up talent isn't restrained to a particular area. Like, we can go everywhere and do it. So, you know, but for individuals, like, I think anytime I interview a candidate, I say, tell me what you want your next role to feel like. What do you want it to taste like? Like, really think about what you want to create for yourself, and like, go get that, whatever that is. You're deserving of it. Culture. Speaking of vacuums, ambition doesn't happen in a vacuum. So there's something really palpable in the Bay Area when you see so much, you know, money, I guess, like, forget the humanity for a minute. You see so much success, you've seen so many people exiting and growing and getting funding, and there's like a real energy around that. There's a real desire that it's a rat race. There's a keeping up with the Joneses effect. Like, I've got to compete and be on board with that. And that exists beyond, like, certainly that exists if you're a founder or if you're a CEO, but that exists amongst your team. So there's a you know, a ripple effect of that. And I think it's very much a Jekyll and Hyde ripple effect. And on the one side, you have teams that will work their asses off and live and breathe their company. On the other hand, you have team members getting up at 5 a.m. to prepare for their day before their children wake up. And so there's a real, like, bright and dark side of this. And this is really something that I've grappled with, because I think I'm the only person at TeachStarter that, you know, works the hours I work, but that's my choice. That's just something I'm accustomed to doing. I need to, you know, and I think it's been really great that my team has been really patient and like, oh, you're working at 11 p.m. That's nice. And like, had real boundaries, and I really encourage that with my team. Ooh. I told me it's about 7 p.m. But I think there's a hunger that exists in the Bay Area, and there's a willingness to do whatever you have to do, and work as hard as you have to work. And it's there's dark and bright sides to that. Finding a happy medium is a journey for me. There's a very dark side to the Bay Area, and I've hinted at this a little bit in when I've talked about wealth here. I think perhaps, and this really, it's gotten worse in the last 3 years, or maybe I'm just not blind to it anymore. But this is my backyard. This is Oakland. This is in a nice part of Oakland. This is uptown Oakland. And yeah, I think in many ways the Silicon Valley has really failed to invest in and support the community that has really then created the infrastructure and services that they're dependent on as an industry. And you know, a great example of this, my stepdaughter, while she was going to uni, was doing security at Facebook, making $12 an hour. She was not a Facebook employee, so every single Facebook employee is entitled to stock options, not my stepdaughter. 12 because they've outsourced all of that. And you know, and then the ripple effect of that is very, very real. And then you see those I-4s driving past this neighborhood. And it's a very, you know, I guess if you see this a lot, you get blind to it. But I think it's harsh. And I think you would not see this in Brisbane. And I know there are people in Brisbane that are sleeping rough, and I know there are people that are doing it tough, but I know that Australia doesn't get it all right, but I do believe we live in a country that tries to take care of its people.
Yeah, the changes that have happened over there making it worse. Is there a change in the technology companies that help out, or is that not there?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I don't know in my 10 days if I got enough of a window into that. You know, I noticed that at a lot of the restaurants we were eating at, they had a policy around giving 1% of their earnings to community food banks. Is 1% enough? Like, this is a profound problem. And, you know, I think poverty exists in the United States, is so deeply entrenched in the United States. And like everything we see on TV, all the palm tree lined streets, like it's kind of a fallacy. Like it exists for 1%, 5%. I was talking to one of our team members in the US who's an ex-teacher, and she left teaching recently because she just couldn't anymore. And the reason she couldn't anymore is when they moved to remote learning, all of a sudden she had a window into her students' lives. And she's like, you know, how do I fix, you know, that Jimmy doesn't have a floor in his bedroom? How do I fix that, you know, Jessica sleeps on the porch? Like, how do I fix these things? How do I, there is so much wealth disparity. And I would say that it's just gotten worse and worse and worse in the Silicon Valley in particular. And if you refer back to that map where I was like, tech is moving, it's just eating up all of the, like, it's moved into Oakland because Oakland was affordable, and now Oakland isn't affordable. So now people that used to work at the port in Oakland and live in Oakland are now commuting 90 minutes each way to be able to afford rent and still work at the port. I think it's a real shame. As conversation my son and I have, there's an old military base just outside of Oakland that is now defunct and has housing for like 10,000 military people that's just sitting there empty. Why don't they? It's so obvious. So, you know, moving along, how am I adapting? And, you know, where am I not adapting, right? So I've got 4 things that I'm trying to do. I've always wanted to be a teacher. I had this like vision of being a college professor at some point in time, but I had epiphany at some point that I get to do that by being a manager all day long. And so we hire for high potential here, and then we commit the time and the training and we create the experiences for our team members to become unicorns. I think we did say that recently. We had a role that was particularly hard to hire for. We'd been looking for someone for about 6 months, and we couldn't find someone that checked all the boxes. And so we found this guy, I'm not going to name anyone, but we found someone, and he didn't have any of the experience really that we needed, but there was just something about him. Like, let's make a unicorn. Let's make one. Sorry, team, but I question the status quo relentlessly. So my team probably wants to kick me sometimes because I'm always asking, like, why is that? Does it have to be that way? Who made it so? We have I challenge my team members to expand their thinking about what is possible. And like some of the greatest fulfillment I've had is when a team member has come to me and said, I didn't think we could do that, but we did it. Yeah, let's go. And I meet my team, I do what I can to meet my team where they are, like get curious about why are they thinking the way they're thinking? Why do they see the limitation they see? I try to meet them there in that place, but I refuse to stay there with them. So I'm embracing the opportunity to mentor. I'm really trying to help TeachCharter become more of a product-led company. Thank you, Greg, for your partnership in that. Couldn't do it without you. We talk about falling in love with problems first and foremost, or Greg will say, is this a solution looking for a problem? And we don't do that. We're really working to embed customer research and insights into how we make decisions. So like, well, how would the users feel about this? How would teachers, we try to call them teachers, not users. We're really focused on solutions at scale to meet the needs of all customers. So very early in the history of TeachCharter, because it was founded by someone who was an end user of the product, they focused on any user need, like any teacher that said they wanted this, it's like, well, we've got to give them that. And now we're really thinking about, how do we be very analytical about what one teacher is saying that they need and what that infers for what most teachers would need, or the teachers we're trying to serve would need, and find solutions that scale to meet those needs. We've shifted our investment in product and engineering talent dramatically. So when I came to TeachCharter, we had 1 product manager and 3 engineers, and I think we're probably triple that now. And we won't, like, at some point there's a healthy balance there, but I think that really this is about investing in sustainable IP that we can then build the business on. It's a foundation we can build on. And we talk about quality being an experience, not an attribute. This is an evolution, not a revolution. We're not there yet, but we're working on it. I hyphenated it. I usually don't hyphenate this word, can-do-itness, and then people go, what is can-do-itness? It's a word I've coined. I think it was Dinesh from Silicon Valley said, I can fail in circles around you, which I love. But we talk about like celebrating can-do-itness. So it's just, this is that attitude that I think I was talking about in the mindset, like what is Silicon Valley? Is it a mindset? It's, it's this, and I think this is so very important, because you don't generate growth because you've done something. You don't generate value because you've done something. You generate growth and value because you have the capability of doing it. So we ask questions, how might we, all the time? How else might we? Not how could we or how should we, but how might we? And I think that the difference there in the word might is it's way more open-ended. It invites way more creativity in the solutions. And then we balance that with, well, yeah, but what's the worst that could happen? And what might happen if we just try? And yeah, we might fail, but what would we gain from trying? And the other thing we've done is we've given employees skin in the game through incentives. So I think it's really important to, if a company is thriving and growing, that employees are participating in that. Creating a healthy incentive where some of that ambition for themselves comes through. And last but not least, I am doing my darndest to hold on to my humanity. Confession, I have to attribute this big tech is in many ways psychopathic line. That comes from my tarot reader. But it really was profound when she said it. And it is like to really, and I can tell stories of being at that table where billion-dollar decisions were being made, and the absolute lack of humanity and respect for human beings that happens in those conversations. You know, but then like also then going to dinner and talking about those people's families and that they are humans. That the environment of big tech itself can be psychopathic. For me, the holy grail is succeeding because we have heart and not surviving inside of it. So we talk about being a company that's big on heart and always thinking human first, customer or team member second. And we tell stories. And that's how we hold on to our humanity. And I think that's it. Yay! Sorry I spoke for so long. We do have some time for Q&A. If anyone needs to leave, I won't be offended. I have 3 Teach Starter t-shirts in the color and size of your choosing. There's a we call this Brisbane Jacaranda. There's, I don't know, what is this, cream and chalkboard green. If anyone's interested, first 3 questions gets a t-shirt in back there.
I have a question about one of your slides said around like the are you profitable question.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned earlier that there's like 40,000 companies, startups in Silicon Valley. So how do you go about navigating like people that are like slinging vaporware versus people who have like actually like properly anticipated the market and figured out like, because you also said like the real value is what they're going to be grow to be. How do you, when you have those conversations with like every person you meet, how do you figure out like if they've got something or they don't?
So it depends what stage you're investing in, right? Like I would posit that early stage VCs are investing in a person and an idea, not anything real, but it's the potential that it can become something real. When we were doing corporate development, and this was kind of Barry's whole thing, was like, I don't want to be playing in that space. I want there to be something real, tangible that I can actually diligence and know that there's proof. So when we were diligencing companies, they would get 5-page diligence question lists from us, ranging from, you know, give us 36 months of all of these metrics to who are your key employees and what are you doing to retain them. So I think it's, in a nutshell, you have to do your homework. You have to do your homework on a category. You have to do your homework on the people and on the IP. Yeah, second question. You only get 1 t-shirt though.
Well, not like homework. Is the culture of like being Google or such like just personal questions, I suppose? Is that like way more acceptable, like and candid, or is there like certain lines that we cross before you can like see the books and see the growth?
From a diligence perspective, it's certainly expected. It's, you know, we would, like when we divested dictionary, we were like, we're willing to show you this much more information. If you want more, like how serious are you? And as you kind of progress in that conversation, show more and more information. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I'm keen to understand like some of the like challenges and opportunities of transitioning from a founder-led business into a CEO-led business.
Yeah. There's a lot. I feel like that's a whole nother presentation. Look, when I joined TeachStarter, this was something that I was really thoughtful about, and I think that Jill and Scott, much to their credit, were also very thoughtful about. And so very early on, I kind of designed that relationship with Jill and Scott. You know, like, how will we make decisions together, and where are the red lines? And do you understand that one day you're going to look at TeachStarter and say, what have you done for our baby? And I'm going to say, well, she's not a baby anymore. Like, so I think it's, you know, the way I've navigated that is just by very honest and candid and frank conversation with Jill and Scott. But there's a whole nother aspect of that, which is the team. And I think this happens with any management transition, that it's profound. It's perhaps a little bit more intense when the old manager was the founder. And I think that there's a real, when I joined TeachStarter, there was a real understanding and knowledge that, like, and a sense of responsibility for Diller Scott, because this was like, they have been invested, they've got so much sweat equity in this business and so much of their own personal wealth and well-being is tied up in the business. And so I felt that, but then the team also felt that. And then they're like, well, do Diller Scott know you're doing this? It's like, you know, so being, I think, more transparent with the team about, yes, this is the way we set it up and designed it. I think that the other big cultural shift, there was many, but the one that's coming to mind is, you know, in a truly founder-led business, things happen because the founder wants them to happen, right? Oftentimes, and sometimes founders are really rigorous in their decision-making and their thought process, and in other times it's an idea that they have at the dinner table on a Friday night, and the team comes in on a Monday morning and it's done. And you know, so then the kind of expectation around transparency, the expectation around accountability for how those decisions get made is something that we've had to really foster and create. And we're probably still working on it a little bit. I can't see your name, but hi.
Oh, hi, I'm Dominic.
Hi, Dominic.
I thought it was really interesting sort of question to ask in the interview process, like what do you want your next role to feel like?
Yeah.
You mentioned around the challenges of talent. Could you maybe talk a bit more about the hiring process and maybe some ways that you found to help find that unicorn that you were sort of describing?
Yeah. Well, Hunt and Go has helped a lot in this for us. Like, and I have to give a ton of credit to the Hunt and Co team, because what they've done phenomenally well is get to know the TeachStarter culture and like find people that align with that. It's we hire in a very values-based way. And I think as our recruiting partners, Hunt and Co get that. But I think that the thing I didn't mention about the stark differences between talent is, in a world where there's almost a glut of talent and all the good ones are taken by the companies that are willing to pay top dollar, you have to get really, really good at figuring out who's good and who's not, because you're working through the leftovers, kind of, sort of. And we created a methodology for that. Sorry, black and white. There's gray. We created a methodology. I have to credit one of our CTOs with this. We have a panel interview. It requires a unanimous thumbs up for us to proceed with an offer for a person. They go through multiple rounds of conversation. At the end of the day, the question we ask is, would you like to work with this person? It's not, can they do the job? Are they the best person to do the job? It's, would you like to work with this person? And we're really hard, like, we're very, very precise on that question. And I think there's so much tied up in that question of, would you like to work with Greg, Nick? Like, it presumes that they're capable of doing the job, right? Like, you wouldn't want to work with someone who can't do the job that you're hiring to do. But it also covers off on, like, the no assholes piece. It covers off on that there's something that person brings to the table that's going to make the team better. And absolutely, like, if anyone is a no to that question, then it's a no. And there's no veto. No veto. That's very Australian. Hey, Tanya.
Transitioning to product-led growth is super painful.
Yeah.
How have you been doing that, and what's like the top challenges?
Talent.
Critical mass of people.
Critical mass of people. Challenges, technical debt. Like, until very recently, our whole business was run on WordPress, and we customized WordPress to the point of breaking it. And I'm proud to say that's not the case anymore. There's still a significant portion that's on WordPress, but we're working through that. But that's very, very, like, technical debt is really real, and I guess, you just have to try to get through it one bit at a time. And I think the third piece is really data. Greg, you might feel, but I think it's taken us a while to really wrap our arms around all of the drivers of the business and how all of these things are interrelated. And Greg sings the tune of growth loops, growth loops, growth loops. And we've just recently kind of drawn a blueprint of the business. It kind of looks like a software architecture drawing, but it's our business blueprint of like how all of these loops interact and relate to each other. And it's like, okay, I can see it now. Like we need to do this thing and then this thing and then this thing. And, you know, we're continuing to work through how that then impacts our roadmap. Hi.
Hey, is there a difference between being a woman in tech in Silicon Valley and a woman in tech in Brisbane?
That's a really good question. I'm definitely going to have to think about that one. I think my off-the-cuff answer, and this again, like black and white, not gray, and it might be more of a reflection of culture in general. This is going to sound controversial. All right, apologies for that. I think as a woman in tech in America, I probably felt more sexualized than I do here. So I can be really organic and matronly here versus like needing to put on my pencil skirt and my high heels in the valley. And I'm not sure why that is. That's just my gut reaction. I can't tell you. Actually, this is actually really stand up. I had to learn about sports. You know, because I would walk into executive meetings and the conversation would be about baseball. And I don't know how it is elsewhere here, but like we talk about our kids. Like it's very family centric, at least for us here at Kickstarter. And I think, yeah, I don't know. It was very much a bro environment.
Hi. Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Firstly, thank you so much for being incredible with a lot of really interesting ideologies and aspects there. So thank you.
You're welcome.
You talked about the psychopathy in the Bay Area, but also how there's a conscientiousness and a drive, a heart. My question is two parts. What is the most monstrous thing you've seen in your experience in the area? And what was the thing that most restored your faith in humanity?
Oh, Ken.
Should I leave?
Look, I don't know, like there's so many monstrous things that you hear and read about. So, you know, I'll give you the answer of the one I saw. And maybe this isn't the one, but it's the one that comes to mind. I'll give you two. I'll give you a couple. So it is commonplace, that homeless encampment, the photo I showed you, it is no longer there. It is no longer there because it's around the corner from Pandora's office. I don't know, I'm making this like I'm conjecture here, but it's around the corner from an office area and it would have been cleaned up. So that's pretty monstrous, I think. Like there's so much wealth and like, what are we doing instead of moving these people along? How are we helping? I think that's pretty monstrous. This is a different example, but it's probably more tangible in the business. So health insurance is incredibly important in the Bay Area and in the US, I should say, like incredibly important. If you don't have health insurance and you need to go to the doctor, you're out of pocket thousands of dollars, point blank. And I'll never forget, we were looking at a digital publishing business in the health space. And this was right around the time where Obamacare was happening. And one of the investment theses that we had was because more people will have health insurance, more people will be consuming health content because they'll be going to the doctor more frequently. And as we presented this thesis to, upper executives at IAC, they literally had zero clue how health insurance worked, like zero clue. And it was just this real, and so we explained it to them, like we did our best, but it was like, wow, you guys just are living in a whole different planet, because I was still trying to figure out like how to pay for the cost of delivering my son, which had just happened. Like it was very just stark, and I don't know that that's monstrous as opposed to like just a really good illustration of the vast differences in that. What was the second question? What restored my humanity?
Yeah, like what's the kindness that everything most building high?
Yeah, this might be a cop-out answer, but like truly my kids, like the fact that my 14-year-old is talking about using military facilities to house, like that, the fact that, yeah, and I think that was ultimately one of the reasons why I decided to, like, I brought them back to Australia. This is the part of the story I left out. Like, why did I come back? Well, I just didn't want to partake in that environment anymore. I wanted my children to have a wholesome life that was humane. And, I like Marquise is a gamer, like he's building computers. I would love for him to have a career in tech. I just want it to be balanced. And maybe coming home in a way, I don't know, travel has been huge. I think that's another way I've held on to my humanity. I don't know, I'm going to think more about these questions rather than rambling, but that's what comes up.
Carly, hi. I love the panel interviews that Lisa does. What's been some tangible examples of how it's helped inform or make a hire that you probably wouldn't have originally made on paper, or also the diversity events, like getting different people in the room to help?
Yeah, so from a diversity perspective, I think it's really important. We're very thoughtful about who sits on the panel and making sure we have diverse representation on the panel. So if we're hiring an engineer, we don't just have all male engineers interviewing. We have someone from product, someone from design, and a couple of people from engineering. So there's diverse perspective that goes into that decision, but also the person on the other side is also getting diverse, experience themselves. So they can hopefully see themselves belonging. And I think that's, when we talk about diversity, it's important to talk about belonging. How it's helped make decisions. Look, I think the fact that you're making this decision as a group and it's unanimous really allows you to take a risk where otherwise you might not, right? Like if everyone else in the room is willing to say, I would like to work with this person, and I'm not looking for the reason why I'm not making this decision solely on my own. I'm not solely responsible if it goes wrong. So I'm more able to kind of be open to the possibility if everyone else in the panel sees potential and possibility for this person that, I might be just right on that. Does that make sense? There's another.
As far as productivity goes, what have you seen been the biggest differences in cultural, I guess, Brisbane versus Silicon Valley in teams and cultural attitudes towards startups and working hard? Have you seen, is there a difference between that between the two ecosystems?
Very much so. Yeah. I don't know. No one on my team left their computer at work ever. I have people, like no one didn't take their computer on vacations or to the kids' face, but like everyone has their laptop with them. You buy a purse that fits a laptop by definition for a reason. If we could walk down there, half my team's laptops will still be on their desk now. I think it's, and as I said, there's goods and bads that come with that. Yes, probably lower hours worked in a team here in Brisbane, fewer hours worked. Are they more productive or not? One could posit that if you're not burnt out, you're more productive. I think though, rather than numbers work, because that's an input thing, right? It's more kind of the sense of urgency that exists when there's that kind of energy and momentum and ambition that permeates the air that you're breathing. And so we've tried to kind of cultivate a healthy balance of that there. And doing that through giving the team incentives so that if we achieve our KRs that are on the wall back there, then we all benefit.
That's wondering out of 10.
Ken.
Would you raise capital, and if so, where would you raise it? You raise it here or like
That's a decision for Jill and Scott. If I were in Jill and Scott's shoes, sure, I would. But you know, it's not without risk, and it's not quite my decision to make. Where would I raise it? I'm agnostic of location. I'd be more focused on finding an investor that is aligned with us in vision and values.
would you think you get better term sheets under in place due to high risk appetite?
From what I've heard, value is you'll get a better valuation in the States for sure. But with that will come more pressure. Anyone else?
Is there a message on the screen?
Oh, there's a message on the screen. Yes, there's a message. Okay, Bill says, can we create new tech startups that might create replacement alternative jobs for all coal mining in Queensland? Bill, I'll leave that one to you.
Thanks, Bill.
Right. Well, I'm happy to take any last questions, or I'll be hanging out for a while if anyone wants to chat.
Thank you so much for coming. You're welcome to stick around and have some more drinks and have some pizza. If you'd like to join the discussion, there is a Mind the Product Slack group. So go to that URL and yeah, we can chat about this later. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the evening.